Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur. We're out here less than a month away from Selection Sunday. It's crazy to think about how fast this season has truly gone. We are in the home stretch and we were having a lot of fun as well as being profitable. What do we do here? We find ourselves those window trips. We love walking to the window. And we love it when we open up our DraftKings and FanDuel tabs and see those green screens and window trips all day, every day, all month long. Let's get it. A successful Tuesday, to say the least. We predicted a low-scoring slate. It was a low-scoring slate. Thankfully, plays like Jalen Lowe, Lance Terry, Dylan Mitchell all came through for us. The value, not as much. Jaden Mustaf couldn't stop fouling, but thankfully that didn't matter. And Josh Jefferson, a surprising loss for Iowa State and a surprising loss for Florida. Thankfully, Jefferson came through for us either way. And it was a great overall night slate as well. We're going to keep it going. Props, middling. It was 4-4 day on the props street. But you know what? We're going to continue grinding our way through. Feel extremely good about our process right now. There's a ton going on at ftnfantasy.com. We are going to have a March Madness landing page, which is going to have all kinds of info about brackets, conference tournaments, tournament thoughts in general, just a ton of content that you can absorb and be ready and just take your fellow coworkers and friends to school when it comes to your bracket pools, taking care of business. If you're watching on YouTube, I do want to thank you. And if you're on Twitter/X, also much appreciated. If you can help me out, one favorite I'm going to ask, drop that like button there. And also, if you're not subscribed yet, please do so. If you're new around here, like and subscribe, as well as drop those notifications. That way you don't ever miss a single solitary episode of the Super Show. My counterpart, our chief content officer, Mike Randall's doing his thing on the betting side. His betting show a couple of times a week is absolutely phenomenal as well. And as we get closer to that day, Selection Sunday, you're going to find the Super Show and Randall's betting show are more daily as we go. Lots and lots happening. Projections doing well. And what we offer here is not only breakdowns and articles for each slate. We also have the Super Show stuff, but just being in our FTN DFS Discord, providing late breaking news, any scratches, talking about injuries, kind of just game planning and working through the slate as it goes. One of my favorite days of the week is actually Sunday because we have that all day slate and it really pays off to be able to grind throughout. Starts early in the morning, gets into the afternoon, late evening, and just being prepared with that PMR to make those decisions. We really are feeling good about that. All right. Sorry about that. Had some technical difficulties. But yeah, lots of good stuff happening there. We will be going live this Friday night as well, right around 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, midnight Eastern, the flagship Friday show, getting ready for Big Saturday. Still plenty of opportunities to get into the Mania qualifier there. What do we got? Qualifier number 44 taking place today at the $250 level. So still right around 19 to 20 spots left. Have no fear. And we, of course, have the 3K to first flagship tournament taking place, the $15. Little Birdie does say we're going to have Survivor tournaments for March Madness this year, which is one of our favorite things. The Survivor is always fun. And then at FTN, we're going to have very fun stuff as well. Bracket contests for sure, but we're also going to do like our own little fantasy draft like we did last year, hoping to expand that and maybe have a couple of leagues where you're drafting players who are in the tournament and basically doing like a season-long format condensed into the 6-round tournament and hope to be part of RotoWire's tournament as well, which we've done 3 or 4 years in a row, and Razzle continues to win. All right. We're going to do the tried and true method here. I don't know why we're having so many technical difficulties here on this. StreamYard added a few pieces, and I don't know if it's causing problems here. There we go. That might help. All right, we're going to go game by game, tried and true method. It's a 9-game main slate. That's going to be the predominant focus of today's show. There is, of course, if you're part of the community, coverage for both the 9-game night slate as well. There's projections for both, detailed conversations taking place in the Discord, and just being ready with that injury news. So let's get started. Let's kick it off. Let's pop up the projection sheet here and get that fancy custom layout. Number 7, our favorite. There it is. Let's go. Let's get rid of that. And let's begin. All right, first game on the slate, Michigan State versus Maryland. This is a total of 149.5. That's a little high for a game between these two. I think the under might be live here. We'll see. Maryland is a 3.5-point favorite. Do kind of like the Spartans here from a betting perspective. Projected starting lineups here for the Spartans: Jaden Akins, Jace Richardson, Jackson Keeler, Jeremy Fears, and Siman Zapala. For the Maryland Terps, Derek Queen, Julian Reese, Rodney Rice, Selton Miguel, and Jacoby Gillespie. That's been the starting lineup group that they've ran with for pretty much the entire time of the season. They've had some slight changes here or there, but that's been the group that they've run with. Their bench is definitely going to have to contribute more as they get into tournament time. You can see here on the actual projection screen, this is a slate, for what it's worth, that I do foresee being higher scoring than yesterday. We have some pretty big score projections for certain players, and we have value available at our fingertips. This particular game, not as exciting to me. You do have a 4.7K price Jeremy Fears, which is an interesting look, but he's just trapped in that 23 to 24 minute range, because you have Trey Holloman coming off the bench, who's playing roughly 25 minutes as well. You have Jace Richardson, the freshman, who's taken off, become one of the better scorers on the team. It's just a very crowded group in the perimeter, and there's also a very crowded group in the front court as well. So as deep as this team is, it just makes it very difficult, especially in a road matchup like this, to get too excited. So Fears is technically playable at 4.7. Would be much more excited about him if Holloman were out or somebody like Akins was out. That's not going to happen, though. So I don't think we're going to have much exposure to this particular game. Maryland side, Selton Miguel, he had been popping up in the projections for 2 months straight. DK's finally priced him to a level at 6K where he's not just an auto click. He's been scoring extremely well. Anytime he's under 5K, you just pretty much click him in. And anytime he's under 6K, it's a pretty big play as well. You see he's the best projected Terp, but still that doesn't mean a whole lot. GPP-wise, Julian Reese, Derek Queen, and Jacoby Gillespie are your top 3 options. I do like Gillespie to a degree here, but don't really want to get too involved with Reese or Queen. I feel like foul trouble is going to be a relatively problematic aspect of this game. So not going to spend too much time on this one. It is a larger slate, and I want to get through it rather quickly. So let's move on to our next one here, which is going to be Georgetown versus UConn. And this is a much more conducive environment for fantasy purposes, one that I would expect to see a pretty big spike in ownership. Yesterday was nice because we really only had 2, maybe 3 players who were like super 60% plus. Dylan Mitchell of Cincinnati, which we kind of figured, with his price down, and then Elijah Martin for Florida. Mitchell had a great game. Martin so much. Florida not so much. But those were the 2 that were. I think we'll have a lot more overlap on this slate. But there's just some really cheap price players here. And we're looking at a very intriguing matchup between these 2 in the Big East. These 2 did play earlier this season, back on January 11th. It was a UConn victory, 68-60. In that one, they didn't have Liam McNeely. Remember, he was out for a few weeks there. Caravan put up 19 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, 1 steal. A phenomenal stat line there for him. San Diarra had 6, 3, and 4 with 3 steals. And then we had 15 and 2 out of solo ball. Nothing really off the bench. Terrace Reed was in foul trouble, so there wasn't much outside of the Caravan Ball Diarra trio. On the Georgetown side, Curtis Williams knocked down a bunch of threes, scored 15 off the bench, and Micah Peavy had 14, 4, and 1, but he turned the ball over 5 times. And Georgetown just didn't look very good. Everybody else in single digits. And that was at the Capital One Arena. And now we're going to be on UConn's floor in Storrs. So this is a pretty tough situation for the Hoyas to be in. Couple the fact with they're going to be missing some pieces. This is a 14.5-point spread in UConn's favor, total of 144.5. I'm not super comfortable taking UConn with so many points, but when you look to the Hoyas, it's hard to imagine that they keep this one competitive for the entire time, especially considering the fact that Thomas Sorber will be out for the remainder of the regular season, and then Caleb Williams is still very questionable. So starting lineup shaken up like this for the Hoyas: Malik Mack, Micah Peavy, Drew Fielder, who's been filling in for Sorber, Jaden Epps, who's had a minor resurgence here the last few games, and then Jordan Burks, who's been starting for Caleb Williams. On the UConn side, Samson Johnson, Hassan Diarra, Alex Caravan, Solo Ball, and Liam McNeely. Excuse me. So as you can see here, we have some pretty big projections on several pieces. Jaden Epps near the top there at 5'8". Do temper expectations there. He was pretty porous in their last matchup. Played only 14 minutes off the bench. Remember, he was in and out of the lineup, dealing with injuries, illnesses, this, that, and the other. So he was not effective in those 14 minutes. He'll clearly have to play more since they're missing two. Well, they're missing one key piece, possibly two, and he is very much in play at 5'8". Probably more of a tournament look. He's not so cheap that at 4-5 you have to just play him and you know feel really bad about it. You have a decision and you can fade. He has put up 26 plus DK points in 3 straight, so he has been producing, but this is about the time he's about to throw up a clunker. Just be careful of that. He has taken 9 plus shots in 3 straight as well, so the volume has been there. And minutes have as well, 2 straight playing at least 39 minutes. So that's why he is projecting the best. Now, after Epps is where we get into some real single entry, main team, high dollar cash type plays that I feel very comfortable with. One being Alex Caravan sitting there at 6'7". Caravan did have a solid pocket of ownership last time UConn was on the slate, roughly 15 to 20%. We may see even more than that. Again, on the 11th, when they faced Georgetown last time, he put up a near 40 fantasy points there, and that was without Liam McNeely, but he was also priced higher in those days. Only 6.7K, playing 35 plus minutes. If it turns into a giant blowout, that would impact him negatively, but I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case. I do think they'll be ahead enough to be comfortable, but I don't think they'll be able to pull starter super early. So I do expect that mid-30s range for Caravan. Just came off a solid 32.5 fantasy point performance against a very tough St. John's team. So definitely like Caravan, number 1 play in this game for me. After that, you get into the Liam McNeely at 7'7", a good GBP pivot off of what I believe to be a chalkier Alex Caravan. Hassan Diarra is still relatively cheap at 6'2". He was just okay in their last matchup, as I mentioned. And then thanks to a ton of steals, we have 4 steals against St. John's. He ended up putting up 30. Now, if you take those steals away at 4.7 rebounds, 6 assists, certainly decent. But without those steals, he would not have been up over that mark and been closer to undervalue by slightly. A little bit worried about him. Not a ton. I think he will get more steals here against the Hoyas because they do have a propensity to turn it over, especially when driving to the lane. So there is that upside there. But I do prefer Caravan to Diarra. And I think the slate's big enough with some marquee matchups later that we don't necessarily need to stack UConn, although you can. Solo Ball, another GPP look there that you can consider. And then, of course, with Terrace Reed, Samson Johnson. Big men. One of them is going to get into foul trouble. Neither of them did particularly well last time in this matchup, but there's no Thomas Sorber, and we're going to be able to pick on the Hoyas front court here for the remainder of the season. Does look like a very sharp spot, a very nice part to play Terrace Reed. The only thing that could stop Terrace Reed is, in fact, himself if he can avoid any type of foul trouble. See, he just projects because I have him right around 21 minutes, just over 4x, but we know his upside is much higher than that. He could easily turn in a 40 fantasy point performance, especially if Samson Johnson gets into any kind of early foul trouble in front of him. Now, on the rest of the Hoya side, outside of Epps, you have Drew Fielder still cheap at 4.9 and Jordan Burks at 4.3, both injury fill-in starters. Fielder has been mega chalk. You kind of just plug him in regardless, and this is a tougher spot for him. His rebounding upside is going to be hampered due to the fact that UConn does have a tremendous group of rebounding players at all positions. So he's not quite the plug-and-play value that he has been. Still projects well, of course. Going to get a ton of minutes, barring any foul trouble. So definitely in play there. Would be the preferred Hoyas play for me, even over Jaden Epps. Burks is a nice secondary value at 4-3. I do feel like it's going to be one of those games where he hits like a 3x number, so I'm not plugging him in automatically in every lineup, but he's definitely a solid source of value and salary savings across the board. As for anybody else, Malik Mack, Micah Peavy, I do some manual refinements to the final iteration of the projection. So Peavy obviously going to project better than you see on the screen there slightly, but he is 10-8. And I still don't see him going over 40 in this matchup, although the way he's playing right now is just ridiculously out of his mind. So he definitely has that slate breaking upside GPP look, probably sub 5% owned. Don't mind the heat check on there, but obviously Coach Hurley and the gang are going to have quite a game plan to slow him down. I'm sure of that. So Caravan, Fielder, top 2 plays for me here. Epps, Burks, McNeely, Diarra, all in play. Terrace Reed, possible slate breaker. Not quite to the level the other night of Yannick Conan Niederhauser, where we're really excited about if he could avoid fouls. Not quite as excited about Terrace Reed, but if he does avoid foul trouble, he's certainly going to be in a position to land on the optimal. All right, next game on the slate, Notre Dame versus Clemson. It's a total of 135.5. Clemson is a 14.5 point favorite. We, lo and behold, have some injury designations here, and we have some value pieces that we can utilize as well. Excuse me, just getting over that, the ick that the kid's passing around. So I got that sniff cough. All right, so injury designations here. Braden Shrewsbury is questionable. I do expect him to play. Mataloko is questionable, and I do expect him to play. Clemson side, minor characters, but Asa Thomas and Christian Reeves both questionable. I don't think either of them will play. Minuscule minutes for them anyway. Asa Thomas is a pretty nice look for the future, but just not right now. So with that being said, Notre Dame should have their full allotment of players. Don't love the spot for them against Clemson. Neither does Vegas as double-digit underdogs. Tate Davis and Marcus Burton are always intriguing looks for tournaments. And if Braden can't go, we did see our boy J.R. Coe, for short, Cognicia. He is 4-3. He got the start, but I don't really want to go that way with him. He is your prototypical corner standing cheap play that lacks touching the ball, a lot of possessions where he doesn't, and it's just not a situation I want to get too involved with. And we're not hard up for value on this slate like we were yesterday. On the Clemson side, we do have Dylan Hunter. Let me go through the starting lineups on that real quick. Neglected to do that. So what I expect it to be on the Notre Dame side, Sir Mohammed, my guy, Braden Shrewsbury, Kevin Njai, Marcus Burton, and Tate Davis. And then Clemson, the Hunters, Chase and Dillon, Ian Schiffelin, Victor Lakin, and Jaden Zachary playing their starters into the ground, regardless of if this one gets out of hand or not. Perhaps we see a few more minutes for Chauncey Wiggins off the bench, but I'm not too worried about that. Dylan Hunter at 4-4 playing 30 minutes. He's a bit hit or miss. You know, the floor is not locked in. He could some games give you a 5 or 6x number. Other games, he gives you a 2 to 3x number, but a very solid source of salary savings within at just 4-4, knowing he's going to play those big minutes. And it's pretty well locked in as a starter. Took Chauncey Wiggins' spot, and I think that's been better for Clemson. Victor Lockett and Ian Schiffelin both slot in there as interesting GPP looks. I do think you could play Ian in your main. He's under 8K. We know there's upside there. Notre Dame's front court, it does have some pieces like Kevin Njai, who can shot block, and Tay Davis, who can get it done in a myriad of ways. But bully type of front court players have got over on them, and I do think Ian is going to have himself a fairly large game on the boards. See there, we have him projected for over 9 rebounds, perhaps some prop opportunities there, and he is projecting over 4x as well, so definitely worth a shot. Victor Locken, the reason he's more of a GPP look is because of the foul issues, and sometimes he just inexplicably doesn't get minutes in the second half, and he'll end up playing under 25. For those times he does play over 30, you'll see he puts up a huge number. Right now I have him slotted for 24 minutes over value. If he gets anything above that, he does become that slate breaker that we've seen in the past, but very, very risky. And then Chase Hunter at 7-4, you know, running the show, taking shots. He's definitely a main team look. Not as interested in him as large field GPPs, but definitely getting a ton of minutes there. All right, so Dylan Hunter coming away from this one is our guy. Next game on the slate here, NC State versus Syracuse. It's a total of 146.5. The Cuse are a 1.5 point favorite. Our projected starting lineups here for the Cuse: Eddie Lampkin, Jair Davis, J.J. Starling, Lucas Taylor, and Jaquan Carlos. Elijah Moore has been banged up. He's officially questionable. That's why we'll see or likely see Jaquan Carlos start. On the NC State side, Jaden Taylor, Ben Middlebrooks, Michael O'Connell, Dontrez Styles, and then the freshman Paul McNeil. Now, perfect case here while I pull this up. Perfect example here of being able to follow along the slate and ready for any kind of news. The Paul McNeil starting late was towards the end of the slate the other day. And it was a situation where people just missed it. He was like 2% owned. And there were some people who just weren't on even our Discord, but the ones that were, we took that swap to Paul McNeil. Hey, he's starting. This is a big deal. And he worked out better than we could have possibly even hoped. I was expecting him to, hit some kind of 12 to 13 fantasy point number and was pleasantly surprised to see what he could do. And funny enough, on that show, the show before that slate, I had mentioned, man, NC State, when is Coach Keats going to start playing these young guys like Michael O'Connell? Okay, Dontrez Styles, like Marcus Hill, it's just not working. Your season's getting away from you. You're on that Final Four hangover. You can't really be mad as a Wolfpack fan because of the run you made last year. But when do you start playing Dennis Parker more? When do you start playing Trey Parker more? And when do you start playing Paul McNeil more? And we saw Paul McNeil slide into the starting lineup last game over Hill against Wake Forest. This was about 4 or 5 days ago. He played 28 minutes, knocked down 4 threes confidently, and he put up a huge number, 37.5 fantasy points. That is a top 1% outcome for when you make an in-slate swap to perfection, right? And that one worked extremely well. His price has bumped up, of course, from 3.3 to 5.2, but he projects still well if you're going to give him those minutes. And you see over the last, 3 of his last 4 games, he has eclipsed 18 fantasy points. 13 minutes, he scored 22 against Louisville. That was in a blowout loss. In 14 minutes, blowout loss to the Tar Heels, he scored 18. He is just chucking when he's out there, taking a tremendous amount of threes. And then in complete control, best game of the season for the Wolfpack, beating Wake Forest there 85-73. I expect Paul McNeil to start again, and I expect him to start for the remainder of the season, just a handful of games. On social media, Wolfpack fans are excited about the program again. It's been a lame duck season, and all you'll see there is the talk about Paul McNeil. Coming into the season, there was talk about how Paul McNeil is an amazing scorer. Dude can score from anywhere. The reason he couldn't get minutes early is he just couldn't defend at the D1 level, so they couldn't put him out there. Now that the season has gotten away, let's be honest, unless they make another run through the ACC tournament, that's not postseason plays probably not happening for them. And there's no reason not to play Paul McNeil into the ground regardless. You can hide him on defense. You got Brandon Huntley-Hatfield. You've got Ben Middlebrooks. You got guys in the paint who can take care of it if he gets beat on the drive, the dribble drive. Now, offensively, he just gives you so much, and he can create shots for himself, create for others. He's just a really exciting player, and there's just no doubt about it. His high school career was an amazing scorer. This dude is legit. So at 5.2K, maybe it's high enough to keep people who missed him on the last slate to stay away, but I'm still going right back to him. And you can see we have a very favorable projection, even at the 20-21 minute mark because of his high shot rate there. Over 24 fantasy points. The matchup is solid against Syracuse. They have not been very good defensively themselves. They do have Eddie Lampkin down there on the block, ready to block shots, grab rebounds, make life hell for opposing big men. That's not going to worry, or that's not a worry for Paul McNeil, who's going to get his shots on the perimeter, and he should have that quick trigger going. I expect him to have another good game. Similar to the first half that we saw out of Isaiah Evans of Duke yesterday, who came through in a big way for us. Weirdly or oddly, Tyrese Proctor went out in that game. We thought Evans was going to have a big second half because of it, and he didn't. But the defense is adjusted, I would say, even though Miami's terrible. But I expect a similar game from Paul McNeil. So not a chase because we were on him last slate, and I'm going right back to him. Dontrez Styles is a nice look as well. A little spendy at 6'5", but he has a solid floor. He's a main team look. Jaden Taylor is a play we see a lot in single entry contests. A lot of people play. He's only 5'7". And then, of course, you have Ben Middlebrooks there as a value piece under 5K. Rebounding upside is extremely high in this matchup. Minutes, he's pretty much splitting with Brandon Huntley-Hatfield right now, so it kind of diminishes the upside for both, but they're extremely cheap. Huntley-Hatfield is 3.7 as well. You could throw him into a GBP. Get yourself some Janai Broom action. And then, of course, Michael O'Connell, who I was angling for him to hit the bench, but he played really well with Paul McNeil and handled the facilitating and just allowed Paul to just shoot. And I expect the same to be rolled out here today. And if Dontrez Styles is hitting shots too, it keeps the defense honest. They can't just cheat over and double Paul McNeil or try to deny him the ball, because Styles will make you pay. And Jaden Taylor can as well too. On the Syracuse side, not a lot doing there. Petar Mastrovic is the value piece at 4-1. His minutes have been ramping up. And of course, on the GPP side, JJ Starling and Eddie Lampkin are both worthwhile tournament looks. But this is all about Paul McNeil here for me. Probably not a stat game, but if you did like a Jaden Taylor, Paul McNeil, or a Dontrez Styles, Paul McNeil type of stack, makes a lot of sense here. This is not one of those Brandon Cummings of Pittsburgh situations where, shit, that guy played 30 minutes. He looks great. He just scored a high number. We got to go back to him. And then he plays 5 minutes the next game. Not worried about that. If he doesn't start this game inexplicably, then we can reel it back. So I'm not paying 5-2 for a non-starting Paul McNeil because I just can't guarantee those minutes. But as long as he's in the starting 5, it would be very silly. I think Keats is a good enough coach to keep starting this kid. At 5-2, it's still going to be way too cheap. All right, let's move right along here to the next game. Excuse me. Ole Miss versus Auburn, total of 153.5. Auburn is a 13.5 point favorite, and the front court of Ole Miss has their work cut out for them, and there's going to be a lot of whistle blowing going on in this game, not because of any secrets being told, but because they're going to be hacking Janai Broom left and right. I have been saying for the last, 2 weeks now, anytime we have a player that's over 10K and they project so well, and me as a purveyor of balanced builds, and I try to go more with that style as opposed to the stars and scrubs, even I have to make the recognition if the player is over 10K and they're projecting to absolutely obliterate the slate, we just have to find a way to get him. And there's been so many slate days of show slates, Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, where we just haven't had the pay-ups. They've been a little lackluster. And we keep saying, well, we don't have Cooper Flagg this time, or we don't have Janai Broom this time. Well, we do have Janai Broom. He's 11K. He's not that expensive on FanDuel. He's an auto lock there. He's an auto lock here. He is projecting over 50 fantasy points against this Ole Miss front court. We have the value at our disposal. We've already talked about a few pieces. We have some others that we're going to get to. It's really simple, guys. Just roster Janai Broom. They're at this point here. The game he just had was absolutely ridiculous. It seemed as though that Auburn might be a slight upset candidate because Georgia has been playing so well, and we saw them beat Florida last night, so kudos to them, respect. But they were able to push Auburn enough that it kept Broom on the floor, and you saw what happened. He played 37 minutes, 31 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists for a cool 60.5 fantasy points. Anytime we get him over 30 minutes, and Auburn, Coach Bruce Pearl especially, he doesn't like to necessarily play his guys over 30 minutes. We see a deeper rotation, and he kind of tries to keep his guys fresh because of the way that they play. And he was very resistant. We hadn't seen Broom playing over 30 minutes pretty much hardly at all last year. And it took some time this season, but now we're seeing it consistently. And anytime he eclipses 30, 31, 32 minutes, and you don't have him regardless of price, it's just a very tough situation. You have to almost be perfect on the other side if you don't play Janai Broom, especially today. It's going to take a massive letdown against his Ole Miss team for him not to pan out. These two teams did play earlier this month, February 1st. It was a 92-82 win for Auburn. That was a road game. 20 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists for a 46 spot for Broom. Anything between 45 and 50 at minimum, I feel good about. If he hits just 40, we're still okay. It would be a real shock if he didn't pan out here. So yes, Janai Broom, me, the balanced Betty purveyor that I am all over Janai Broom today, and you should be too. We do have some injury designations here as well, just some light ones. Matthew Morrell, who's seemingly questionable every single game, typically practices the day before. That didn't happen here, so he is truly questionable instead of more probable. And then Chad Baker-Mazzaro, who's questionable as well. I do expect both to play for what it's worth. So starting lineups here, Malik Dia, Sean Padula, Jalen Murray, Dre Davis, Matthew Morrell. If Morrell can't go, expect a bump for Devon Barnes. Janai Broome, Chad Baker, Mazzara, Miles Kelly, Dylan Cardwell, and Denver Jones for Auburn. If Chad Baker can't go, Tahad Pettiford, Chaney Johnson, those guys would pick up some additional minutes, extra usage. They're so good off the bench anyways. But that would likely be the case. We did see Pettiford play 21 minutes in that Georgia game. Chaney only played 11 because of foul trouble. But if Baker has any kind of restrictions, limitations, or doesn't play today, Pettiford and Johnson are going to be your main benefactors. Big size disparity, so Chaney will jump into the starting lineup, but that's just makes Pettiford the lone option off the bench who can go and get a bucket. So expect a lot more usage there for him. You could see here, Auburn's pretty much their entire starting five projects well in this spot against Ole Miss. Outside of Broome, Denver Jones is cheap at 5-1. You do have Pettiford off the bench. Now he's under 5K again. Dylan Cardwell is interesting at 5-4. I think it's an interesting stack would be Broome with Cardwell and just soak up all the rebounding in this game. You can see he projects over 4x. Chaney Johnson would be a big bump to 30-plus minutes without Baker. Don't sleep on him. And then Miles Kelly, who's a little bit pricey for me. He's probably the one Auburn starter or top 6 piece that I have like zero interest in today. But other than that, I'm fine with anyone in an Auburn uniform for the most part. Ole Miss side, your main two are Dre Davis and Malik Dia. Bumps to everybody in the starting five and Barnes without Morrell. Davis is cheap enough at 6-1 to speculate on, but I just don't want to target against Auburn on their floor unless it's an elite team, a Tennessee, an Alabama. Not that Ole Miss can't be elite under Chris Beard. They certainly are good upper tier, but I just don't see them having a lot of success here offensively. I think Auburn's going to be physical, and I think they're going to have a favorable whistle. So it makes me very nervous rostering somebody like a Dre Davis, who has a tendency and has shown he will get into foul trouble. And that goes for Brakefield and Dia as well. Alex, I didn't see you yesterday, and I was getting a little worried, but I knew a Wolfpack slate today would bring you out, and I love it. Wolfpack slate, you're in the front row, so you'll be at the game. All right. Hey, Paul McNeil, how fun was that, huh? Can't wait. I'll be looking for you, man. I'm excited about that one as well. And never say never, Again, the hangover from the deep tournament run, and everybody's hanging their heads in Wolfpack country and Raleigh there. But who knows? Maybe they go on another unlikely run here with Paul McNeil seizing that elite North Carolina State guard role that we've seen every single year pretty much, where somebody just continues. Markel Johnson, legendary DFS option, and there's been many others as well. So love Paul McNeil here. Love the Parkers too. I like Dennis Parker the most, just like as a player overall. But man, this is so suddenly everybody's excited about NC State basketball again, and I love it. I absolutely love it. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Vanderbilt versus Texas A&M. Total of 145.5. 7.5-point favorite is the Aggies. Starting line projections here for Vanderbilt: Jason Edwards, Devin McLaughlin, Tyler Nickel, AJ Hoggard, and Chris Mannion. On the Texas A&M side, Zurich Phelps, Wade Taylor, Henry Coleman, Solo Washington, and Anderson Garcia. We don't have any injury designations that we need to worry about, at least at the moment. This is a game that may or may not surprise you that has several pieces on both sides that project fairly well. We want to have exposure on both sides. Starting with Vanderbilt, how about the game that Chris Mannion just had? He's had some pretty decent games in the past, but since transferring to Vandy, he's just been a kind of a quiet 20-minute per game starter that just kind of, he's the 5th or 6th option on the team. But 16.7 rebounds against Ole Miss, 3 blocks, 4 steals, put up a whopping 40, which was just a masterpiece. Priced at 5.2 now. Obviously not going to be much of a play at that price, but it shows you that he does have upside. He just hasn't had a chance to really show it. Interesting look against the Aggies, a team that has had some turnover issues in SEC play. So perhaps some GBP love there for him. But at 5.2, we've probably missed the boat if you weren't using him, as he was a sub 5K option for a real long time. Devin McLaughlin at 6'9" does project the best as a Vanderbilt option. Texas A&M has a plethora of front court guys that they will rotate in and out. Not a lack of discipline, that's the wrong terminology, but there's definitely some issues in the front court. some lazy fouls, some things that you can take advantage of. And McLaughlin is just such an aggressive rebounder that I think he's going to give them a lot of problems, and he's going to find himself at the foul line a lot today. Key will be, can he shoot better than the 50% we've been seeing him shoot from the foul line? So he's a little spendy, and I don't want to lead you guys down a road like with Jalen Carey, who we were really excited about a couple of weeks ago, and he had some good games, but just at that price at 6'9", where if it doesn't pan out, perfect situation, it could just really set us back in a bad spot. So I did list him as a single entry option on the article today, but he's probably a little bit better suited as a tournament play, especially on the road there. But another one of those Yannick style plays where if he avoids any kind of foul trouble, he is going to put up a big 30+ number. I'm very confident in that. You do have a very cheap price Jason Edwards, as he always is. High usage rate, high shot rate. He just continues to chuck. Got to make those shots, though. He's been under 20 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5. That has led to the depressed price here of 5.8. Getting himself out of that shooting slump here against Texas A&M. Very good opportunity for him. And then A.J. Hoggard is low 5K range at 5'3". He's also only hit 20 fantasy points once in his last 4. I don't recommend using him at any point in your main. He's cheap, don't get me wrong, but man, he has a real annoying way about him that makes it to where I can't roster him in my main anymore. Goes long periods as a point guard, basically long periods with no statistics to speak of except turnovers, and it's just maddening. So he has gone down in price because of the ineffectiveness by low opportunity against Texas A&M. I like it better if he was at home here. I'd feel a lot better about Vanderbilt's chances, honestly. But he's got to be at least, in the conversation there at that price. And then my man Jalen Carey off the bench. He's had some minutes reductions here lately. Old Miss wasn't great. Kentucky, he just got into foul trouble, couldn't get himself out of it. Before that, 3 straight games over 27. Now he's under 6K, back as an interesting look. Reserved for GBPs, but he does have slate breaking upside. And you can see overall, 24, 25 minutes puts him close to value. But if it's one of those games where he sees more, especially here against this Texas A&M athletic front court, they're going to need Jalen Carey. If he gets closer to 30, we're looking at a really big number out of him. Texas A&M side is where we're going to be really looking, and I know the collective groans because Wade Taylor we've thrown into our main build a couple of times, and the game against Georgia, he didn't really come through for us. He had a big game against Arkansas, then he was not so great against Mississippi State. Then he had a really inexplicably great game, 9 assists against Tennessee even, and he's priced at 7.6 now. So he's not exactly super cheap. He's still the Wade Taylor to me that we were paying 9K plus for all last season. So when I look at the sticker price of 7.6, I'm just like, man, how do I not use him? But I am remaining disciplined here. I am looking instead at his teammate who's nearly 1K cheaper in Zurich Phelps. Phelps was sleepwalking a little bit, not a lot of hype, not a lot of talk for him, not a lot of ownership for him. But we definitely have to take note of what he's been doing recently. 2 of his last 3 over 32 fantasy points, 7 turnovers against Mississippi State. It was just a terrible game for the Aggies in general. They got absolutely just dumpstered. So throw that game out against a tough Tennessee team, 15 points, 11 rebounds. That was an impressive outing. And against a very athletic, exciting Arkansas team, 12 points, 9 rebounds, had 4 steals. Like him at 6'7", quite a bit. And you can see when we look at the top there, after the likes of McLaughlin, Edwards, and Hoggard, who are technically better projected, I do think Zurich Phelps is the best overall play in this game, priced at 6'7", right around 30 minutes. He hasn't been playing more than that because they are rotating some other guards in, but in a competitive game, which I expect this one to be, I think we could see a spike in minutes for him and something, resembling his SMU days, maybe even a 40 spot in the can there for him to unleash. So I do like Zurich Phelps best. Solo Washington is cheap at 4.6K. I just can't use the Aggies front court. I used to be one of the lone people who would, get involved in those situations, playing Pharrell Payne, Anderson Garcia. I do like these as an individual player, as a basketball player, but when it comes to DFS assets, there's just not a lot here. It's too lean. 27 minutes for Solo Washington against Tennessee, that's a ton of floor time for a player at 4.6, but less than 15 fantasy points, that's just not going to get it done. You see against Georgia, threw a 30 on the table, so that upside is there. But there's just too many guys in the rotation, too many mouths to feed, and a lot of shots just go to Wade Taylor and funnel into Zurich Phelps. It doesn't leave a lot for the others. Solo has to get the majority of his work on putbacks. They're just not running plays for him. So he is cheap. Pharrell Payne is cheap at 5K, but the Aggies forwards, just not great plays here. I was actually looking before the show started at props, rebounding props for like Henry Coleman and guys like that to see about taking unders. We have Coleman at 5 rebounds, but most books have it at 5.5, 5. So not a lot of value there. But I was looking at that. So and it tells you where my head is at here for this one. All over Aggies guards, not so much on Aggies forwards. All right, now we get to the game of the slate. And how could it not be? If you have watched me at all this season, you know I always talk about when one of these 4 is on the slate. Hey, there's 4 teams. Whenever they are on a slate, we need to stack 4 and against. One of those teams happens to be UCF. Absolutely adore this team. I know their tourney hopes are out. Mike Randall really liked them coming into the season, and I could see why. They had the major talent. Coach Dawkins, you know, he took a shot on Dior Johnson, took a shot on Mikey Williams, all these players with maybe checkered past, and just brought in all the talent and said, I'll figure it out later. And boy, do they have an endless amount of talent, but defense has been non-existent for the most part. So that is where the targeting against them comes into play. Targeting for them comes into play because my man Keyshawn Hall, who did let us down last slate, yes, but that's actually a good thing because I are going right back to Keyshawn Hall, and I expect the industry to jump off. He did have somewhere in the 30-35% ownership range last slate, and he dudded out. People aren't going to be on him. He's priced under 9K. He takes every single shot possible. He does have a turnover issue, admittedly, which makes it a little tough on FanDuel sometimes, but I absolutely just love Keyshawn Hall. How does he not throw down a 40 here against Kansas State? I don't know. As far as the projected starting lineups here, we do have a doubtful status on Coleman Hawkins, so this would be the second straight game he doesn't play. Jalen Sellers questionable for UCF, likely not playing again this season. And then Raucus Jockius, who did have some spot starts when Motiem was out, is questionable as well. So what we're looking at is the following. Kansas State, Doug McDaniel, David Ngasson, Max Jones, CJ Jones, who started for Coleman Hawkins last game, and Brendan Housen. For UCF, Keyshawn Hall, Darius Johnson, Mikey Williams, Motiem, and probably Jordan Ivy Curry. That 5th starter has been Niels Mikowski. They've been kind of rotating in and out. Ivy Curry plays more minutes when he does come off the bench anyway, so he's basically that 5th starter, but I do think he slides back in here. So a lot to like in this game. We have the value in CJ Jones. He's priced at just 4.2. That was another one in Slate News. Coleman Hawkins out. Jones on that day, I think he got to like 8 or 9%. And he had a really good game, right? He didn't break the slate like Paul McNeil did, but he was adequate for his price. And I think he'll be adequate once again because he has that UCF modifier that just allows you to, kind of get at when the game starts, you're at 10 fantasy points. Really like Max Jones. You see he projects extremely well. He never has ownership, decent enough shot rate. He shot poorly last game, which led to the rough game. Now his price has dropped to 5.8. I think he's main team viable. We were all over David Ngasson last slate. He rewarded us well. Without Coleman Hawkins, he's just going to do everything in the painted area. You saw in 30 minutes, 13 rebounds, 20 points. Hit a slow, sleepy start against ASU, but in the second half, he completely took over. It probably helped that Jaden Quaitance was once again injured. I don't think he's made it through a full game this entire season, but that was just an epic second half for David Ngasson. Yes, his price has come up. He was 6.4 then. He's 8.2 now. If anything, maybe that upper tier price that of over 8K gets his ownership way, way down and people don't go there. But again, this is the UCF matchup, guys. We have to mini stack this game or full stack it. We just can't allow this game to go by without multitude of ownership. And the industry continues to do that. We're not going to. 2 or 3 pieces from this game is pretty much mandatory in my eyes. Whether that's CJ Jones, David Ngasson, Keyshawn Hall, Darius Johnson on the other side, you have a different, bunch of groupings that you can do. Housen is also interesting at 5.1. He's playing a ton of minutes, shooting a lot. The peripherals aren't there, so he's more of a secondary look, but he's cheap at 5.1. Prefer Max Jones over him. And then Doug McDaniel, the GPP extraordinaire. Likely going to pull a ton of steals out of this one. UCF was turning the ball over, just reckless abandon against OK State a couple of games ago. We saw like 3 or 4 players for the Cowboys all had like 3+ steals. This is a game I could see a big steal from Doug McDaniel, like talking 5 or 6 steals, a legitimate outcome for him in this game. So it gives him that GPP upside, but he's behind Ngason and behind Max Jones and CJ Jones for me. We did see with Coleman Hawkins out, we saw a little bit more Ugonna Onyenso, who played about 15 minutes. He has been almost at a fantasy point per minute in his last 2 games. This is another great spot for him. Like I could see him pulling down 10 rebounds or more if he gets close to 20 minutes in this one. Not a big score, but he's going to do a lot of shot blocking. He's going to do a lot of rebounding, and he's near min price. And then you have my guy, Moby Ikuruka. He didn't play as much as I expected him to. I actually thought he'd play more in the mid-20s. Yes, he's more of a wing/perimeter option, so not a direct replacement for Coleman Hawkins, but he is a solid rebounding piece as well. Had 7 rebounds, 2 points, only assist and a steal in 18 minutes. I think he can do more. I think he can do better here against UCF, so he's a GPP value at that 3.8 price point for sure. My man, Moby. UCF side, as I mentioned, Keyshawn Hall, but Darius Johnson shouldn't be ignored here at 7.5. It's an underprice for him considering what his upside actually is. You might remember last year for this team when Jalen Sellers was healthy, him and Darius Johnson were just murderers row. Darius Johnson frequently dropped 40s on the heads of many programs, filling up the box score. Doesn't get as many shots these days, and the shots he does get are kind of contested. So we don't see him scoring quite as much there because Keyshawn Hall is just an absolute, when the ball goes to him, he's not passing it. But Darius Johnson does everything else. He facilitates, he grabs boards, he steals. Him and Doug McDaniel is an interesting matchup, and I'm looking forward to watching this. I don't think I've missed the UCF game at any point in the last month and a half. Literally streamed or watched on ESPN every single UCF game. And I plan to do the same here tonight. Mikey Williams maintained his starting spot there. Only played 14 minutes against Utah, so I'm backing away from him slightly. He is 4K, so if he's starting again, you can look at him. You saw in the prior 3 games to that, he played over 20 minutes, and he had over 19 or more fantasy points in 2 of those 3. But I'm a bit skittish about the 14 minutes there. And it was a close game against Utah as well. Just kind of got phased out, and he wasn't particularly good on defense, which tends to happen for him and everybody else on this UCF team. Debo Coleman ended up playing more in the second half. And you might remember before he got banged up, he was the starter. So perhaps we see Debo Coleman slide back in the starting lineup over Mikey Williams. We'll see. Debo played 23 minutes against Utah, and he had over 20 fantasy points. So I do like whoever starts from those 2 as a secondary value. It gives you some lineup flexibility. And then Jordan Ivy Curry coming in at 5'9". That's a really cheap price for him. He's also seen the shots kind of dwindle at times because of Keyshawn Hall, but he can get hot and he takes a ton of threes. So if it's a game where Keyshawn gets into foul trouble, Ivy Curry does pick up those additional shots. And he had a pretty damn good game against Utah because of his 4 steals. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, at 6'5", Motiem, if he could stay out of foul trouble and get like Ngason into foul trouble, he's just going to be completely unchecked on the block. You saw him against Utah, 9 rebounds, 18 points, put up a huge game, dealing with the flu, hit his own version of the flu game. The front court of K-State, it's decent enough. They have some size with Onyenso, but TM is just a really versatile. For his size, he's extremely versatile. He can hit threes, and I'm not sure that Kansas State has the guy in the front court that it can actually check him. So I'm actually looking at him at 6'5" and giving him some really serious main team thought. It's going to be difficult to get him in because we're going to be playing Janai Broome. We're going to be playing Keyshawn Hall. I don't know where that leaves us with Motiem. As far as his projection goes, he's right around 3.8, 3.9, but I do think he's in line for a much bigger game than that. But overall, take away from this, you can see 1 through 8, all viable fantasy options. Keyshawn Hall, Max Jones, CJ Jones, kind of how I'm feeling like attacking it. David Ngason is right there too, but I'm going to come away with 2 at least from this game, probably even more than that. All right, moving on to the next one here. We have Penn State versus Indiana. Oh, let me get in here real quick. Craig says, "Are you off Key Hall?" You must have. Did you drop that while I was talking? Yeah, you must have. I'm never off Keyshawn Hall. I don't even. Craig, you and I go way back. I don't know what you're talking about there, but no, I'm never off of Keyshawn Hall. I mean never. I can't even remember the last time that I faded him. So he didn't make the core, but that doesn't mean I'm off him. My core was a little bit different, which I'll talk about here at the end, but he's right there. He's going to be the posh play. So no worries there. How dare you? Adam says, afternoon show, do it first one time, UCF, home team. Yeah, I can count on you to stack UCF. You do it with me, I know. So you know what time it is with UCF. All right, Penn State versus Indiana. This could be the game that makes or breaks the slate, and I don't love that, but it really probably is going to be the case. It is a total of 149.5. The Hoosiers are 5.5-point favorites. Our projected starting lineups here for the Nittany Lions: Ace Baldwin, Zach Hicks, Freddie Dion, DeMarco Dunn, and Yannick Conan Niederhauser. On the Indiana side, they did switch up their starting lineup last game with Mbako and Omar Ballo hitting the bench, but I have it on good authority that we'll be looking at this starting lineup. Anthony Leal, Trey Galloway, Omar Ballo look good, and Malik Renew. It was Miles Rice over Ballo last time, but we'll see. It does look like we've had a bit of a condensed rotation for Indiana. Injuries have happened, ineffectiveness have happened. Players like Kanan Carlisle just haven't worked out. But in that 73-58, so for me, surprising win over Purdue was at Assembly Hall, so I'll give it to him. They basically ran a 6-man rotation, which was the starting 5 plus Omar Ballo off the bench, and he played 22 minutes. Mackenzie Mbako and Kanan Carlisle were the only 2 subs in the game for Indiana, and both of them played under 10 minutes, which means Mackenzie Mbako is back in the doghouse once again. Surprise, surprise. Trey Galloway played 38 minutes. Anthony Leal played 35 minutes. And Luke Good played 33. Miles Rice played 31. So you can see here on the projection screen, perhaps a little uncomfortable for me, but Trey Galloway, Miles Rice, all of these players are projecting really well at the price points that they are and the minutes that they are. I am refining that down slightly to kind of temper expectations. But if Rice is going to play 30-plus minutes at 4.9, volume-wise, he probably gets there against a Penn State defense that just doesn't look like a Mike Roach defense. Trey Galloway, same thing, 38, 39 minutes. I mean, 5'6", got to be in consideration. And then Malik Renew, who is slowly creeping up there at 6'8", still probably underpriced. There is a balanced build out there you can run without Janai Broom. Malik Renew is included in that. And then, of course, you have Omar Ballo there at 6'6". If he gets back in the starting lineup, that'll be a hard price not to get to. I think Yannick is destined for foul issues. He avoided those foul issues last time for us and came through. It ended up on the optimal because of the big 40 fantasy point game that he had. That was 2 games ago, actually. Excuse me. No, that was last game against Minnesota, right? Yeah, that was the Minnesota game. He avoided the fouls. He put up 42, 43 fantasy points. I do not think it happens this time on the road against that Indiana front court. And he's also priced up at 7.6. So some decisions to be made here. As far as Penn State goes, I only really like Freddie Dion because he's priced at 4.7, and we get some major, lineup flexibility there for a guy who took his starting gig back from Nick Kieran and is playing over 30 minutes. Now, Dion is not a fun roster because he's another one of those players who goes long stretches without scoring fantasy points. But he does rebound well for a guard his size, and he can get hot, believe it or not. But he's taking volume. 11-plus shots, at least 11 shots in 2 of his last 3, and at least 9 shots in 3 straight. Not hitting a tremendous amount, but he is taking them, especially from long range. Now, this is a DVP spot, guards against Indiana, so it makes sense for Dion there. Puff Johnson is still questionable, more doubtful than anything. And then you do have Ace Baldwin, who theoretically could take care of this matchup and put up a huge score. Last time they played Indiana, though, he was porous. 12 points, 3 rebounds, 7 assists. He shot 5 of 15, only 25 fantasy points. He's 8'9". He's just not hitting that ceiling that we've kind of gotten used to, and he's getting a ton of steals, which is ridiculous. You look at his steals log here, 2, 6, 6, 3, some big steal numbers, but still only hit 40 or more once in those last 4. That's just because he's not scoring very well. His assist rate's high, his steal rate's high, but we really need Ace to be scoring more, and that's just not happening. So he's a secondary pay up, but he does have the DVP spot. I've already been having people ask me about, guards versus Indiana. Can we use Ace? For what it's worth, I did use him against Indiana last time. Wasn't a fun experience. Not so sure I'm going to go there this time, especially on the road in a hostile environment like Assembly. Other options here, DeMarco Dunn at 4.8, still in the starting lineup, but will kind of split minutes there with Nick Kieran. And then Zach Hicks is too high price for me at 7.2, but he's never met a shot he didn't like and wouldn't take. So the decision to be made here is, how much do you trust the projections here on Indiana? How much do you trust their coaching staff to play this short rotation? If they do again, you have to consider them because of the volume that guys like Leo, Rice, Good, and Galloway will get. But I'd be lying if I said I was confidently clicking any of the Indiana players into my build, even if the matchup is great. Probably will end up on one of them. I haven't decided who yet. I want Malik Renew or Omar Ballo, but I have a feeling I won't get there because of how I'm building with Broom. So I'm probably going to end up having to go to a Leo Rice type of play there, which, again, really not that comfortable with. But 30-plus minutes for Miles Rice at 4.9, absolutely in consideration. Craig says, quite surprising the article is all. Plugged him in with no hesitation. Yeah, Keyshawn Hall is always my guy. Definitely the posh play. I don't expect him to be very highly owned. All right, last game on the slate here. We're cruising. It's only noon. All right, let's go. Villanova versus Seton Hall. This is a total of 130.5. Nova is an 8.5-point favorite. What a crazy time. At the beginning of the season, Villanova is, a 5-point favorite or more. Bet against them, and it was profitable. Now Villanova is playing really well. Projected starting lineups in this one for Nova: Eric Dixon, Jordan Longino, Enoch Bokai, Wooga Poplar, and Jameer Brickus. For Seton Hall, it's changed a bunch of times, but right now it appears to be Isaiah Coleman, Brince Ligby, Garwi Dual, Goswell Irahane, and Jaheim Felton. Injury designation, Chauncey Jenkins, who is questionable, more doubtful than anything. Seems very unlikely he will play again this season. Seton Hall has a great coach. Please do not get it twisted. They just have no NIL to speak of, and they're at an extreme handicap because of it. Isaiah Coleman is probably hitting the portal after this season and will get paid. He'll be going to the same place where Isaiah Evans go, because I don't know how Isaiah Evans is going to stay at Duke either, for you Duke fans. They already have an amazing class coming in, so I don't know. I just hope he comes to Washington. That's all I got to say. All right, so in this one, you have a few solid floor projections here, some guys that we can consider. Villanova definitely has pruned down their rotation dramatically from where it was earlier in the year. Coach Neptune's kind of turned things around. Like, this Villanova team, when I watched them play Marquette the other day, was thoroughly surprised at how improved they are and how confident they're playing. And suddenly it looks like this team could maybe sneak into a postseason tournament. But they ran a 7-man rotation in that one, and that was perfect. Wooga Poplar, Jameer Brickus, Eric Dixon, Jordan Longino all played 31 or more minutes. Enoch got up to 25 minutes, and then Tyler Perkins played 24, Jordan Dumont 16. So we like this 7-man rotation. Wooga Poplar is a brand favorite, but admittedly, it's going to be damn near impossible to get him in at 9.2K. He has been great for us whenever we've used him, but there's a big difference between 9.2 and 7.2, and I'm just not going to be able to get there because, like I said, I'm unwilling to play Janai Broom, and I'm going to keep kind of drilling that into your head. If I'm not fading Janai Broom, I don't know that you guys should either, because I'm the first one to look for a reason to not play a pay up. But that is going to cost us plays like Wooga Poplar here, who I love. And he's playing a very soft Seton Hall team that is just going to turn the ball over a ton. Now, he wasn't great against Seton Hall last time. He had some foul issues, and he had a pretty big brick of a game, but he should be able to do some things here. Eric Dixon is actually cheaper than Poplar. Sorry, my boxer in the background barking there. Probably the mailman. Dixon is an interesting GBP look at 9K. He'd been so expensive earlier in the year. Then he fell behind Poplar. He's just churning out those low 30s. So he's a pretty solid 4X look here at that price point. Longino playing all the minutes he can handle at 5'7". In a last man in type of situation here, I don't mind him at that 5'7". He's just playing 36, 37 minutes. Not a ton of upside there, but he won't hurt your lineup too bad. Brickus tends to project pretty well. He's had some big games here, especially lately, but I never trust him either. The 5.4 price point, so I'm just okay there. I do like Perkins off the bench at 4.8. I think you see him play more like 30 minutes here today. He's played 29 plus in 3 of his last 4. and he's somebody that I think is kind of a lock here for at least 20 fantasy points. So it's a semi-value that you can look to if you need, and giving you a hammer exposure type of situation here. Seton Hall side, Isaiah Coleman's been awesome, 8-4. Pretty nice GPP look, honestly, because he's just going to take 20 shots with ease. So that volume there should put him over 30 fantasy points. And then it just becomes a dumpster fire after. You have some very cheap options. The next most expensive, Garwi Dual at 6K of the available players. Adewusu at 5.2, technically in play there if he gets back in the starting lineup, especially. He's kind of stuck in this 20-25 minute realm. And then Felton, who has been starting at 3.4, playing around 20-22 minutes. So there, if you're going that superstars and scrubs build, Felton is at least going to be on the floor. You can look his way, but Seton Hall just is a very bad team right now, and I don't think I would recommend rostering any of them in a primary lineup at any point right now. All right, so that takes us to the end of the slate. The core that Craig was talking about there, starting on FanDuel, I have Brendan Housen because he's under 5K there and just playing every single minute. There's some pretty big cheapies on FanDuel that'll allow us to fit some more. Keyshawn Hall is in my FanDuel core for what it's worth. And then Malik Renew, who I feel is in a very good spot overall. If I can't get them on DraftKings, I want to get him on FanDuel where he's very cheap there as well. And then DraftKings, Paul McNeil, I just put the side note, if starting again, I expect him to. I'm just going to go right back to him. Alex Caravan, who, if I'm going Broom and I'm going Hall, I'm not going to get too many of those 6 to 8K guys, which is the salary range I love to live in. But if I've got to get at least one, and it's going to be Alex Caravan, who I think just absolutely tears it up today and is probably at least 1K too cheap. He should be up close to where Liam McNeely is right now, and Liam should probably be up over 8K. So we're on Caravan there, and then we're going to find a way. Janai Broom is core play number 3 there, with Keyshawn Hall taking the moniker on DraftKings as the posh play, meaning I expect him to be low owned, only owned by myself and some FTN community members, and then put up a 4x, 5x plus score. He has to redeem himself for last time out. I know it was a rough game last time, but I expect him to honestly put up a big number here. And I'm confident in that. His point prop is a little bit high most places, 19.5, which I expect him to hit, but there's not a lot of value to bet there. We have been doing a lot with props here lately and tracking them on the sheet, doing the extended sheet with not only the fantasy projection, but the individual stats as well. So we'll continue loading those into the tracker, into the FTN betting Discord as well for those of you who are in the community and have access to that. And then starting conference tournament week, I will be posting at least once a day a free prop pick based right off the my own research, of course, but also the projection sheet that we do. If there's one that reconciles between that and we blend the two, which is my favorite thing to do, that will be the free play of the day, and we'll be tracking that from conference tournaments up until one shining moment. So lots going on there, even if you aren't a community member yet. But we have a lot of stuff coming out that I'm very excited about between myself, Mike, and the rest of the FTN team. You're really not going to want to miss it. And you're going to want to be a part of all these tournaments, bracket contests, fantasy contests, everything that we're doing. Giving away merch and other goodies that I will clue you guys in on. Also have officially scheduled the Selection Sunday show. The last few years we've done it. We just kind of hang out, talk brackets as they're being announced, see who we can get on for that one to hang out with us, but just kind of breaking it down in real time. And then, of course, lots of bracket talk there throughout. So plenty of March Madness content coming your way. All right, pulled that up. There are a couple of prize picks plays also that I'm pretty high on right now. One being Keyshawn Hall over 32.5 fantasy points. We have him right around 36. I think he hits 40 plus. Wesley Yates over a half 3-point made. Just got to make the one. It is a goblin play, so does take that pay down a little bit, but that's one to kind of bookend and throw in with some 3-pick, 4 picks. And then David Engasson over 14.5 points. No Coleman Hawkins, it seems. I think another big game for him. He's playing UCF. Come on. And then I have 3 best bets. Belmont minus 1.5 versus Missouri State. Austin P minus 4.5 versus West Georgia. And South Florida plus 1.5 versus Temple. South Florida has hurt me a lot this year, but I'm going right back to them. And I think against Temple, they win outright, but we'll take that 1.5 points and see what we can do. All right, let's pull up this. Let's see what we got at the top here so you can kind of visualize and see where we stand. Those of you in the Discord and the FTN community, you can expect the refined projections to be out in the next, 30 minutes or so. So I appreciate you guys' patience as we've gotten all that done. And then there will be night slate projections as well within an hour of main slate starting. The nice thing there is I've already done all the minutes, and I'm going to be posting those actually probably sooner for the prop bettors that are been asking me for the full sheet. We'll have that out earlier. All right, so you can see at the top here, Paul McNeil. And then of all the players, like, the value pieces, the cheapies, the second highest projected player from an X value standpoint is Janai Broome. And it's not an official rule yet. And I kind of, it's almost, a joking manner, but I always say I have this book of fantasy DFS betting life rules to, by Walter Waddell. And quickly going to have in there player 10K or more that projects well over 4X. I just have to roster. So I just don't know how we don't roster Janai Broome. Completely different situation the other night with Cooper Flagg, who was, a blowout game against Miami. Was last night actually. This is just a way better spot, more competitive game. Like, yes, give me Janai Broome. I'll figure out the rest later. Do I have to roster a Indiana guard? Probably. Do I have to roster Jaden Epps? I hope not. Do I have to roster one of his counterparts like Drew Fielder or Jordan Burks? Probably. But we have the value available to us. I want to get Alex Caravan in there. I want to get Zurich Phelps in there. We'll see how it turns out, but I'm going to end up having a ton of values in my lineup. But leaving that screen up there, any last minute questions? I'll check the Twitter feed real quick. But that'll wrap it up. Appreciate you guys' continued support there. Make sure on your way out, you do hit the like button. That helps us a tremendous amount. All those interactions in the algorithm-based world that we live in. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just about 3.5 hours, just under 3.5 hours to lock. Remember, lock is a half an hour earlier today than normal, so don't miss that. And then we will be back Friday night, right around 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, midnight for those of you on the East Coast, breaking down those Saturday slates. Have gotten some feedback or some requests about doing some afternoon/night slate breakdowns on the show. So we'll see if we can actually, instead of doing main, switch gears there, or perhaps do a show later in the afternoon. Still playing with that idea, but that feedback has been given. I have heard it, and I'm going to attempt to make that happen for you guys. So appreciate you. Thanks, Alex, for showing up, as always, and Craig, my man, and everybody else out there. There we go. Let's go through all the different layouts. Best of luck today. Green screens, window trips. Let's get them. Hit me up on Twitter. Make sure you tag me if you have a great night or you hit on anything specific. Please let me know. I get a ton of joy, even more joy out of seeing you guys win than I do myself, and ready to finish strong here and have our best March ever. February is almost done. We were just talking about January being in the rear view mirror. Now we're almost done with February. One shining moment is coming. Thanks, guys. Take care. We'll see you next time.